What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here for the final NFL video of the season, this time for some NFL DFS picks and lineup advice. Super Bowl 57, Chiefs versus the Eagles. We're going to talk through DraftKings and FanDuel, small field, large field, strategy, lineup construction tips, everything you need to crush the Super Bowl on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Joined for the final time this season, Jack from DFS Magic, fresh off his win for the Fantasy Hockey World Championship qualifier, earned his seat. About time, Jack. What's up, man?
Hey, a little tired from sweating that the previous night, but feeling good about it. But yeah, thanks for noting that, and ready to shift back for NFL here. We usually do the two gamers. This is just a one game, but we both had success in these one gamers in the past, right? And especially, we'll probably get into it, but you've been really taking down some small field stuff this year on both sites.
Yeah, definitely. Both sites have been very beneficial for small field. So we'll get into that here shortly, and we'll talk about large field. Basically, everything you need for this slate tomorrow. Before we get started, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. NFL, yes, it's ending, but if you're into any other daily fantasy sports, we're doing content throughout the rest of the year. So make sure you're subscribed to get notified when we go live, upload any videos. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. One final time, we appreciate that. Any questions, I will be monitoring the channel throughout the day and tomorrow. So comment on the video below if you have any questions or if you want in-depth answers or sweat with us. Join our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/discord. So Jack, what I normally do in these single game videos is I walk through the injuries that impact the slate. Fortunately, we can get all of our work done today, or if you're ahead of the game, you could have gotten your work done already because we don't have any game time decisions. No real questions as to who's going to be available. Really, the only things that we have to figure out are how the Chiefs wide receiver rotation shakes out, and how Clyde's Edward-Helaire being back impacts the running back room. So just from that angle, let's talk about the receivers first. We got Juju coming back after leaving the game early during the conference championship. We have Kadarius Toney in the same boat. Miko Hardman is out. But this is really the same rotation we saw for 7 or 8 weeks at a time throughout the regular season. So I'm curious to think or hear your thoughts if you think that anything will change in that regard.
No, I think it's probably the same, and I think we've seen what the field does now, right? They play Kelsey, and then with these receivers, they just love to play Kadarius Toney. It doesn't really seem to matter if he's priced cheaper or as much as the other guys. And then other than that, I think they just kind of play, guys that are values. But I'm just looking at DraftKings pricing. Tony 4,400, so he'll get quite a bit. Valdez Scantling is actually more than Juju, which I don't. Have we seen that at all this year? Or is that the first time?
I think this is the first time, and if we have seen it, they've been very close together. But it's hard to argue against it. Obviously, MVS came off the big game in the last game when everyone else was hurt, but Juju hasn't really been productive this year. As we were doing the props guide, it's like, wow, let's bet every Juju under because he really hasn't done much, and he's coming off the knee injury. So, but I do think because of that and because of the pricing that Juju and maybe even MVS will be lower owned.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm looking at we have them. We have Juju a little bit higher, but as I'm looking at it, I could see him getting squeezed because they're going to click in Kelsey. They're going to want to click in, AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. They're going to want to click in one of the quarterbacks at least, and that's just not going to leave a lot of salary for those more expensive guys. What do you think about the Watson Sky Moore? I think at least we know it's them and not Hardman. But do you think those guys are in play here?
I think they have to be. And honestly, I'm kind of happy that Juju and MVS and Tony are all available because we would have had a free square basically with Justin Watson being the starting receiver at 2K and he would have been like 30-40% owned. So I'm glad we don't. But now instead we get him at 5% and he runs routes. He gets targets even with these other guys because Tony's not a full-time player. Even though he technically gets the most work of these receivers, it's because they force feed him the ball when he's on the field. But Watson's actually on the field a lot during this stretch when all these guys have been available. So I think Watson, we've seen him catch a deep pass before. I think he's a great high risk play at super low ownership. Sky Moore is probably the guy who gets squeezed out because he played a lot last week when Watson was inactive, and he played a lot basically the whole game when everyone else got hurt. But he hasn't really played much outside of that, and it's not like he blew the doors off last week or last game to justify more playing time. So I think Sky Moore at 3,800 will probably be less than 5% owned, but I'm willing to throw him in there just because, at least in my 150 max and maybe my 20 max player pool, just because Juju's coming off the injury, Tony's hamstring explodes every other game. Like there's very real scenarios where Sky Moore plays time in this game.
Yep, totally agree. Those guys get a lot more balanced snaps than the ownership reflects. So, any other Kansas City injuries, or do you want to shift to Philly if there is if is even any on Philly?
I mean, the question for me is, and I don't think anyone really knows it, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is 1K, obviously started the season as a starter. The Athletic article came out this week saying that he's ready to support Pacheco and McKinnon in a limited role as the running back three. But he's been here before, right? Like, I just don't know how this is going to shake out. It wouldn't surprise me if he got like 10 touches in this game, but I think the most reasonable outcome is he plays a couple of snaps coming off of injury. But what do you think? How can we leverage the situation if we're wrong or right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the price sticks out. I unless I missed something, the value's pretty gross on this slate.
Yep.
Like there's not, like you said, there's not that slam dunk 40% owned play that's like 1K or 2K. So that opens up the opportunity for one of those guys if he just falls in the end zone or catches a 30-yard pass even, right? He could sneak optimal. And also I just say the KC running backs are pretty expensive given
Yeah.
that they're split in care. I mean, 7,000, like let me look at how much is Miles Sanders?
Yeah, he's
So
78,
yeah,
right?
they're basically
72.
as much as Miles Sanders. They're not as good. They don't get as much. I just given their floors, I guess what I'm trying to say that it's just very high price to pay. So I think that's the way that works, right? Is Kansas City backfield kind of all fails, and or either fade it or you get that 1K guy in there. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been struggling with it all week, and I think the question, because I do think you can see, like you said, it could be one play that Edwards-Helaire is optimal. So I could see playing him with Pacheco and McKinnon. And I think you can only play Pacheco and McKinnon together if you're not playing Mahomes or if you're playing some sort of like Kansas City onslaught lineup.
Yeah, because that price tag is just insane. You got to think if they're both optimal, you really have to thread the needle with like multiple running back receiving scores.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so yeah, I think we hit that.
Okay. On the Philly side, they don't like all season. They don't have any injuries. Goddard's healthy. Hurts is mostly healthy. Offensive line a little banged up, but they're all off the injury report. So fortunately, from a projection standpoint, we have like 20 games of data where they've all been available. So I don't really think there's anything to look at here. The only question is, because their roles are so defined and we really don't have any question marks. At the receiver spot, it's just Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal who are going to play a little bit. Jack Stoll is the backup tight end. Really, I guess the biggest leverage on the Philly side is their running back rotation. Like you said, Kansas City guys are kind of expensive, but also I think the Philly guys are a little bit expensive too for their roles if they're all going to split three ways. And Scott is 3K. That's too expensive for a guy who's going to get maybe 5 touches. Gainwell, 7, 8 touches at 5K. And then we know Sanders can get game scripted out and he's 7,800. So they're pretty pricey, but I think that'll keep all of their ownership in check.
Yeah, I mean, just the way we projected ownership, right? We have them a lot lower, and it makes sense. People are going to want to click in Hurts and one of the wide receivers, and if they maybe don't have enough money for Mahomes, then they'll click in one of those running backs. Yeah, I agree. I think they're all attractive just from a they look kind of gross, like you said, but they could all easily get there. I mean, they do all get the ball, and it seems like I can't figure out if it's. I don't think there's a game script thing. I don't know if you figured anything out, but it seems like they're all getting the ball kind of no matter what.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to have a predictable game script for these running backs. Gainwell gets usage on early downs. Scott, they just mix in randomly. Sanders doesn't play a bunch when they're behind, which could be an impact in this game, or they could run. You really don't know. So I think mixing them in equally is a good way to play it. All right, let's talk about specific contests here. We're going to do 4 different types: small field for DraftKings, small field for FanDuel, large field for DraftKings, large field for FanDuel. And we'll stick with small field first. And Jack, I know you got a 4K ticket for tomorrow. It's a big ticket, so I don't want you to give away too much of your strategy here on DraftKings. But our typical strategy that we look at for small field, and for those who are asking what is small field, basically less than 1,000 players. We usually classify it as less than 500 players with a high risk payout, exponential payouts. And really, Jack, I think you can play basically like the 5 or 6 core guys here: Hurts, Mahomes, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Kelsey, maybe Goddard, and all these guys, and play them at captain. Use one of those 6 at captain, and then pick your favorite of the lower owned options and throw them in there. And that's probably enough to get different. I'm curious to your thoughts on using the quarterbacks versus using a positional player at captain.
Yeah, I hope to learn this from you in terms of the criteria. My instinct would be you can play any chalky captain. You just kind of have to make one small pivot to get different. Do you think? I wonder if I think I'll have this tendency to try to get like too unique or too crazy given the small size. Like I'm always like, oh, I have to have a unique lineup. I need to play a trash player or leave like 2K salary. Like what in your mind is sort of the minimum amount of crazy or unique that you need to get with that size in turn? It could be captain ownership or a flex ownership or salary or even the lineup construction, right?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something I've been beating myself up since October about when I got too crazy and picked one of two lineups for my 4K entry at the time and picked the lower owned option, and the higher owned option would have won $1 million. So I'm very
Oh my
tuned
god.
in to how crazy you need to get or not need to get in this type of format. And really, what it comes down to, you don't have to get that crazy, right? Because the values that people play, the ownership where we see it is all concentrated more so. So guys that we have projected for 18% get down to 12%, 10%. So really what you want to do is if you play one less than 10% guy, that's totally fine. You're probably going to be unique. If you play a guy like Hurts or Mahomes at captain, you probably want two sub 20% guys in your lineup. Salary, you don't have to get that crazy. You can leave 1,000 or more if you want, but really you want to correlate as much as you can. You want the lineup to make as much sense. Whereas large field, we're allowing a bunch of different things to happen. If you play Mahomes at captain in small field, you want two pass catchers with them. You don't want to play the opposite defense. You don't want to play four receivers with them. You don't want to play like a 2-4 lineup with Mahomes. Like just build it to make sense from normal correlation rules and just get different in one or two spots.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at our plug. The general strategy is play captains that aren't more than 20%. Obviously, Hertz is sitting over, well over 20, probably 25 to 30 range. Mahomes is right in there. But you did just mention you think you're comfortable playing Hertz at captain. So is there anything special you do with Hertz captain to try to get a little different, or do you think even just that's close enough and there's enough low end guys that you can just kind of follow that same approach you just laid out?
Yeah, I think you can, right? Because let's just say, like, as we build a lineup here on the screen, you put Hertz in, you put AJ Brown in, let's say, and you put in Goddard, right? That's 5,800 left per player. That's a really chalky start. But you basically, at this point, have to play two guys that are less than 20%, which means you can play Valdez Scantling, Miles Sanders, which I wouldn't do in a Jalen Hurts lineup because it doesn't make sense from a correlation perspective. But MVS, Juju, Gainwell, uh, either of the defenses, probably the Eagles defense because you don't want to anti-correlate a defense versus your captain in small field. Boston Scott, Justin Watson, Noah Gray, Edwards-Helaire. Like you can play one to two of these guys, and honestly, just if you play like Edwards-Helaire, if you wanted to, that's one player, and that's totally fine. Boston Scott at 5%, that's fine. But you mix in one to two of those guys, I think you'd be surprised at the amount of times you're not duplicated once you just mix in one of those angles.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm sure the other aspect too is like if you're duplicated once and you win only $550,000 or
You'll be
something,
okay
like
with
you're
that, right?
probably okay with it, right? So
Yeah.
let's combine two topics. The defenses in this game and 5-1 constructions. I mentioned this to you earlier in the week. I'm pretty limited player with DraftKings single game, but I did chase some of the satellites and won some tickets and got close just playing 5-1 constructions, and they were almost always unique. And they seem to do well just from a correlation standpoint. So, what are your thoughts on the 5-1 and using the defense specifically this week?
So that's the other thing here, and I think because, uh, especially in this game specifically, with a close spread, studs on both sides, values on both sides, the most popular build will be some sort of balance, 3-3, maybe 4-2 on one side. But that's the thing about small field, where you don't have to get that crazy because a lot of times you're building a little heavier stacks because of correlation rules. And if the game is already going to be balanced, or most people are playing it balanced, and you build heavier, not only are you more correlated, but you're more likely to be unique. So that's a really great point. And to that point, you're also including defenses in that. And the defenses are going to be sub 10% in this game. And because you don't have to be perfect in small field, if your defense scores 5 points at 3K, that can easily win you $1 million if in your 4K ticket, or easily win you your small field GPP. So I think if you play like a Hertz 4-2 with Eagles defense, Hertz 5-1 with Eagles defense, Mahomes 4-2 with Chiefs defense, or just a Mahomes 4-2 in general, or you play what you'll see a lot of times, like let's just say you want to play AJ Brown captain, you need AJ Brown to get all of Philadelphia's points basically in order for him to be the optimal captain, or a good small field captain. You pair him up with Hurts. Honestly, one of the best moves is playing now four Chiefs with Hurts and AJ Brown because you want the scoring to be spread out in Kansas City and you want the scoring to be concentrated on AJ Brown's side, and that is a unique construction, even though it's really correlated.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. The 2-4 or even 1-5. You know, we did just talk about, Kansas City. The running backs are pretty expensive, except for Hilaire. What I was thinking was, it seems very likely that Kelsey hogs all the pass catching points, and he
Yes.
could be an optimal one in a 5-1. And it doesn't have to be a blowout, right? It could be a very close game. It's just that the way that the scoring works, Kelsey catches 10 balls, and all those other receivers kind of middle, the running backs middle, right? So I think that's something I've struggled and had to learn is like you can a 5-1 can win even if the 5 team loses or a really
Yeah.
close game.
Yeah, the outcome of the game doesn't matter as much a lot of times. And you bring up another point that is maybe more applicable to large field for this week is not pairing the team's quarterback with your positional player captain. Mostly if you play Kelsey or a Chiefs receiver because of Hurts' rushing ability. Most of the times when we've seen a wide receiver or tight end captain unlinked with their team's quarterback and the other team's quarterback is optimal, it's because the other team's quarterback runs the ball a ton. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields has done it too. So I think playing Kelsey with Hurts is a great way to get different and may be optimal just by pure projections.
Yeah, that's another idea. All right, so I think we got some good small field DK. Any other topics on that, or do you want to shift to another one?
No, I think we covered it mostly there. And again, Jack mentioned the plug. It's up on our site, occupyfantasy.com. Our writer Bismo did a fantastic job laying out all the strategies and angles for this specific slate. That link is in the description below, so make sure you go read that after this video. Yeah, let's talk about large field now. And this is where I think when we consider large field, the field sizes are the biggest they've been all season. And 470,000 entries in the big one on DraftKings. The other smaller entry fees are similar sizes. So, what I'm thinking, if you're playing these contests, Jack, my thoughts that I'm running through are you need to not play Hurts or Mahomes at captain, or you need to leave a lot of salary on the table, or you need to play zero quarterbacks, or you need to play one of these trash guys in every single lineup. So, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how those rank.
Yeah, I to me, I mean, we see it always that I forget the stats in your Showdown book that you wrote, but the quarterback is never optimal as much as it's used, right? I
Yep.
mean, I forget what the numbers are, but that seems like the easiest one to me to start. Like, especially if you're going maybe 10 or 20 lineups, right? That might be a very easy way for people to build. Now, if you're building 150, I'm guessing you will still want to play some quarterback. My gut, I'm curious what you think and I think we looked at when we used to look at this. I think the 48,000 salary mark is kind of where below that it becomes unique very very quickly.
Yep.
So generally maybe you could do something like, if you're using all chalk, you go under 48. If you're using a low end player, you can set some special rules to go up to 49. Is that kind of what you were thinking for salary?
That's pretty much how I'm building this week. It makes a ton of sense. And the pricing is softer for the Super Bowl. So I think there are easier ways to leave salary because we've seen Gainwell outscore Sanders, for example, many times. And that is a, what, $3,800 price difference. Is it conceivable that this game is optimal? You build the optimal lineup, but swap Sanders for Gainwell and leave 3,800. Yes, I think that's very possible. The same could go for like Justin Watson or even Kadarius Toney over the other Chiefs receivers. So I think that's a really reasonable way when we have a couple positions that the backups or the rotational guys could outscore the starters.
Yeah, all right. Here's one I always struggle with when I do this too. Do you play the sort of middling captains that are unlikely to be the highest scorer, but they could get there enough to allow you to jam a bunch of studs, or do you think those kind of builds are generally like over owned and don't win as often as they're used?
They're over owned from the perspective of if they hit, they're likely more duplicated because people are jamming salary. Like if you play Gainwell captain, he's 1%, but a vast majority of those lineups use almost all the salary cap and look very similar. So what I'm debating and thinking about is how can I use guys like Goddard, maybe MVS, maybe Juju, maybe Gainwell. Kadarius Toney really sticks out if they really feature him. He's healthy and all these glowing practice reports. Like, can these guys be the highest scorer on the slate, or enough to where you can't fit in Hurts or Mahomes at captain? And I think that's the question I'm trying to answer. I don't know if they can, but if you're going to be 500,000 people, I think you have to think of some off the wall scenarios where it's a lower scoring game or these guys just get crazy touchdown variants.
Yeah, speaking of lower scoring game or not, we didn't really talk about the overall game script. I get what are your thoughts on kind of the Vegas environment here and I know you obviously heavily research Super Bowls, given all the prop bets. So what are your thoughts on kind of the game environment for this game, and what do you typically see in Super Bowls versus like other playoff games?
Yeah, so I mean the total's usually a little bit overinflated, and I'm always leaning under for the most part. And obviously had the one big Super Bowl where that game went way under the total. But the other thing that we know from all of our research is that the more likely there is to be a unique winner if the game goes under the total. So if you're building for unique lineups, you pretty much want to build for most game scripts that go under 51 points. And that's how I think you would get guys like Tony or Juju or MVS or Sanders or whoever as the optimal captain because there's only a couple scores in the game and just those guys get one or two of them.
Yep, that makes sense. I guess it seems like I mean consistently on both sides is generally the way that works. Um, what about kickers here? I mean, obviously we've learned that you pretty much just lock kickers and make money in general. I think we probably get favorable weather here. Any reason to do anything crazy with kickers, or do you just kind of? I guess this is kind of a general all sites question, but you just kind of eat kickers with your lineups, or anything special there?
So that's what I'm really struggling with because Kansas City doesn't kick a ton of field goals and they don't allow many field goals. Eagles basically never kick field goals and they also don't allow a decent amount of field goals. So if you read our props guide, for those of you watching, basically all of our recommendations in the kicking game are under kicking points, under field goals attempted, under longest field goal, all kinds of kicker unders, which is the complete opposite, Jack, of what we normally recommend for a showdown slate. But this matchup in particular, and uh, if you look at other industry projections, they're projecting kickers very normally 8+ points. All of our projections are and historical team tendencies are saying they're going to go under those amount of points. So my personal conflict is I have a bunch of interest in unders and a bunch of money invested on unders and props. Do I balance that out by playing some of these kickers in small field and large field contests? But also, if they're going to be 20% plus owned like we project, maybe that's an edge. We don't play them.
Yeah, it seems like they're. I mean, we have 20-ish%. I could see them going higher again because at least on DraftKings the value is pretty tight, right? That's
Yeah.
usually when people jam kickers, especially in the high total. We know they're not playing defenses in this game. Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I mean I'm probably not going to use a kicker in my 44-44 just because they're going to be 30% owned, and
Yep.
it feels like a game where they're going to say, oh, it's quarterback duel. It's they're going to go for it more, but maybe the coaches get put on three condoms and
Yeah.
start kicking field goals on fourth and inches. So
It's possible,
hopefully
man.
we don't get a game like that.
I know.
Any other large field DraftKings thoughts?
So I'm just gonna go with like the trashiest plays. You tell me if you think they're worth playing in 150 lineups. This is more of a FanDuel
Answer is
question.
yes for everyone.
Okay. So all right. So
No.
obviously guys like Quez Watkins, Noah Gray, Pascal, that's fine. But what about guys like Jack Stoll, tight end 2, Grant Calcaterra, tight end 3? Like, are you willing to play those guys, or is it if they hit, you're willing to lose out?
For 150 lineups, for $1 million, I'd play Stoll and Fortson. I mean, they play what, at least 10-20% of the snaps.
Fortson
Though,
for sure. Yeah, I agree.
yeah, probably dudes that have 20% snaps or so. I would throw them in there again, just because the value is kind of gross on the slate. But I think we mentioned this a lot. You want to set rules around those guys. Like you don't want to use Jack Stoll and leave $3,500 salary on the table. You could do that with a guy like Gainwell, like you said, right? So I would play those guys, and no, not crazy, but I would do it. You are you gonna dive down there?
Yeah, I mean, the guys you mentioned, I'll play. I don't think I'll play tight end threes or wide receiver fives or sixes or anything. But yeah, I think I will play those guys. So, okay,
Backup quarterback for all the money. Is this?
this if there is a slate, dude. If there is a slate, and probably on FanDuel. I don't know about DraftKings, but like both guys are a little bit banged up. Like I could easily see someone winning $1 million with Chad Henne or Gardner Minshew.
I think I'm gonna do it. I just thought of it for FanDuel. I think I'm gonna do something. You just have to. Yeah, they're
Right.
gonna go like 0.5% on or something ridiculously low.
All right, let's hop over to FanDuel. I brought it up on screen here. Chad Henne is the minimum price. Gardner Minshew is the minimum price. None of these 10K shenanigans. So they're begging you to play it. All right, so let's go back to small field for FanDuel. FanDuel small field, we know that we basically because of the half point PPR scoring, because of the 5 player lineups, we're just locking in one of the quarterbacks, or if it's like a stud running back or stud receiver, we're locking them in. So Jack, any reason not to play Mahomes or Hurts at MVP in your small field FanDuel lineups?
I don't think so. I mean, you're the one that's been playing these. I think you have three entries. So like, are you going? If you'll disclose, like, are you just gonna go Hurts, Mahomes, Kelsey, or maybe double up a quarterback, or what are you thinking?
I'll probably just double up a quarterback, I think. And really, here you want to play because they're going to be popular. One lower owned guy. We'll get a couple here. But the other question here is we know kickers are a little bit more valuable in FanDuel because of that scoring, because of the pricing. So Bucker at 8,500, Elliott at 8K are some of the cheapest that we'll see a kicker. So I think they're a little more viable over here. But also, they're the same price as guys like Valdez Scantling and more expensive than Kadarius Toney. So, and also, right below Gainwell, Juju, McKinnon. So I still find it tough to get to the kickers over here, too.
Yeah, and we did this for DraftKings. I know even less about the FanDuel small field. What are your thoughts on the uniqueness for those kind of less than 1,000 person contests for FanDuel?
People jam salary and they jam projections, and very rarely do you have to worry about uniqueness as long as you play one lower owned player. So if I play Hurts at MVP, I just got to play a Gainwell or an MVS or someone that's sub 20%, and we'll be fine. Ideally, maybe leave 500 or 1,000 over if we're playing a Hurts lineup, but you really don't have to worry about too much.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few attractive low-owned plays on this. I mean, Scott, the defenses again, Gainwell, yep, Watkins. Yeah, there's definitely some options here.
The other mistake I see people make, and especially even the higher dollar small field stuff on FanDuel, is they end up playing these sub 7K guys to fit in double quarterbacks, to fit in multiple studs. And those guys are going to score like 1 point most of the time, and it's really not optimal. So I wouldn't, all the trash guys we've been talking about, I probably would not play them in small field on FanDuel.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Those are how big is that contest? 500,000 people or something? The million? I don't even remember
Oh,
what
dude,
it
it's
is.
crazy. It's 600. It won't fill. We know it never fills, but in theory, it is 611,000 entries.
Whew, man, any other FanDuel small field thoughts, or do you want to shift over to the lottery ticket?
Let's shift to the lottery ticket, right? So those guys that we just said don't play in small field, those are guys you definitely want to play in large field. Guys that are less than 7K, 1% owned. We love those guys. I think, Jack, if you're gonna play 600,000 entries, you either have to play those guys with Mahomes or Hurts at MVP, or you go with your Kendrick Bourne, Tim Patrick angle, and you play these kind of trashier starting receivers and hope they're the optimal MVP. At least that's the way I'm thinking about it. I would not fault anyone if they locked Mahomes or they locked Hurts or they just played both 50% and try to get different elsewhere. I also wouldn't fault anyone if they wanted to play the positional players.
Yeah, I mean, I have this is the thing I have the most experience with, and I just say for this contest in particular, and they've run a couple millies in the regular season. You just with the quarterbacks, I think you can't uh, underestimate how different you got to get if you really want unique lineups. And I don't know, for me, there's nothing more disappointing than entering a contest like that and then seeing that my lineups are like duped 30 times. I'm just like, okay, well, whatever, right? So like if you play those quarterbacks, I think if you really want unique lineups, you got to be like sub 55K salary, right? So that's like that's where people they don't play that stuff. So and you have to. I haven't looked super well. I think there are some cases where that would be okay here. But those are you're kind of threading the needle with. It's kind of those middle tier DK captains you mentioned, guys like Goddard, MVS, like Juju. It's guys that have some upside, so they can get there. They're not like Justin Watson, who's going to score maybe 5 points.
Right.
But it's a collection of those lower priced decent upside guys that can somehow fill out a lineup for 54K. So I mean that's how you play those guys, or you really got to play like one of those 1% trash plays. And even when you do that, you still have to leave some
Yep.
salary. So it's really tough. So with that, if you aren't going to play quarterbacks, I'm guessing you're probably not. Who are you looking at for MVP in that contest?
Yeah, so obviously we get discounts on Kelsey and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, right? Those are the three obvious ones outside of the quarterbacks, and I think you have to play them some. But the ones that where you're starting to get, okay, we need some stuff to happen here for these guys to win because we can all easily envision scenarios where those three guys are the optimal MVPs in this game. But now it's like let's get creative. How does Miles Sanders get there? He vultures the touchdowns from Jalen Hurts. How does Pacheco get there? We saw him take on basically a 3 down role in their last game. If he all of a sudden becomes just their go-to back and plays almost every down, and he gets the touchdown variance, catches a bunch of passes, I can see that. Goddard, we've seen tight ends do it at sub 5%. all the touchdowns funnel through him. And then is where you get crazy. Gainwell, probably not. The only one that I'm considering even is Tony, just because of how much they clearly use him. If he gets a couple pop passes near the goal line, or he's healthy enough to play more than 25-30% of the snaps, he could easily lead Kansas City in receiving. Is it enough to lead the game in receiving? I don't know.
You sniffed out where I was looking. It's those two running backs. It's Pacheco and Sanders. I
Okay.
mean, I'll take a shot on a 1% dude that has multi-touchdown upside, and we just saw Sanders do it, right? He just stole 2 touchdowns in that game. Was that last week? Yeah,
Yep.
or 2 weeks ago. And yeah, Pacheco, he played 3 downs. I mean, yeah, we it's a uncertainty, like there's a lot of risk there, but that's why he's 1% owned. So if you play those running backs, I think you mentioned the anti-correlation. Do you think you would you play Pacheco MVP with Mahomes or Sanders MVP with Hurts, or would you just outright block those?
I would play Pacheco because we're talking about him having the ability to catch passes now. Sanders, I would not because I just don't see. And now I say this, it'll happen for sure. Like the only way that happens, and if you're going to build it with it by allowing it, is an Eagles blowout. I don't think the Eagles blow out the Chiefs, but if they did, it's probably because Hurts and Sanders score like 5 touchdowns combined or something like that. And if that's the case, and Mahomes fails, then yes, that makes sense to do it. Other than that, if it's any sort of close game whatsoever, Sanders is not going to be the optimal MVP with Hurts in the lineup, just based on everything we know about how they've played this year. Because you look at the games where Sanders has gone off, Hurts really hasn't gone off enough to outscore Mahomes probably.
Yeah. Let's revisit so another way that's very powerfully unique in these contexts is the anti-correlated pass catcher MVP with the opposite team quarterback. So I'm going to go through those 4 that you mentioned, and you tell
Okay.
me, would you only play the same team quarterback? Would you only play the opposite team quarterback, or would you do either one, or zero quarterback?
Okay.
So Kelsey, what do you think?
Yes, you can definitely do it. Hurts' rushing ability. Basically, the answer for any KC pass catcher is yes with Hurts.
Yep, I agree. So that brings us to the other ones:
Yeah.
Brown, Smith, Goddard. Mahomes is actually 500 more expensive. Do you see any way that one of those guys is the optimal capped MVP and Mahomes basically outscores Hurts?
Yeah, I'm thinking. How does that happen? How does that happen? Because they're gonna have it's either has to be super low scoring, or they have to catch multiple touchdowns.
It would have to be usually when that happens, it's a funnel between the 20s, right? They catch like 11 passes. Like
True.
Devonte Adams is an easy example. He'll like with the Raiders, he'd catch like 11 passes but not score.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Eagles don't do that, right? They don't really funnel. They run a lot. Hurts runs a lot. It's tough. That's a tough one for me to swallow. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. One because they're all sub 5%, so you don't need to get super crazy. Whereas Kelsey, he'll probably see 10% MVP, so that is a reason why
Sure.
you'd want to play Hurts. So yeah, I'm with you. I probably would just stack Hurts with those guys.
What about zero
All right.
quarterbacks?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the zero quarterback? Because that is another clear way to get unique, especially in a game like this with with the 2 studs.
I think they can get priced out 3K more expensive on FanDuel, right? And if you play those guys, basically any other time in FanDuel history that it's been a zero quarterback lineup, you've had a defense or a kicker in the optimal. So likely lower scoring, or just like all these studs do something to the point where they're more optimal than Mahomes and Hurts. So I would consider playing it for all of these guys for sure. I would probably include the same team defense or same team kicker or maybe opposite kicker. But yeah, I think you can do it. I think mostly because of the pricing. The 3K difference is pretty noticeable.
You hit it. I think this is an off-season project for me, but the amount of times Lamar Jackson was not optimal on a slate where he was like the highest scorer was like it's not zero. It's like quite a bit more.
Yeah,
I think people would be really surprised. And you hit it. It's that $3,000 difference. So you can build a ton of like 57 to 58K, 59K lineups that the quarterback could be the highest scoring player on the slate and not be optimal. So yeah, I think I will have some of those for sure. And yeah, you mentioned it. I still haven't quite finalized what those rules are with zero quarterbacks. So you think it's probably either a kicker on the team or the opposite defense or running back maybe on the team? Is
yeah.
that kind of where you'd
It's
go?
yeah. I mean, pretty much every showdown, both sides. If there's not a quarterback, it's because there were multiple field goals kicked or defenses did their job. And so you almost always have to have one kicker or one defense if you don't have a quarterback. So I think I would use that rule. And if God forbid that doesn't hit, then so be it.
So basically, min one quarterback, kicker, defense from
Yeah,
each team, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah. I think that's a pretty safe rule to use.
Okay, cool.
And then
Um,
So this all leads up to the Sanders zero quarterback, zero kicker defense, 52K with Justin Watson lineup winning $1 million by itself.
Oh my God. The only, we talk about this. Maybe it's negated because of the sheer size of the contest, but we mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Like chances to get guys like Mahomes at kind of the lowest ownership you ever see. I mean,
Yeah.
30% is that maybe if you are not concerned about like solo lineups every single time, like is that a guy you could justify just sort of locking and still trying to get different, but just saying, hey, he's optimal more than 30% of the time?
I think you can. Yeah, I mean, I have no problem in a contest this size or anything similar. If you want to lock an MVP, I'm not going to be the one to argue against that because at that point what you're saying is I'm taking a stand here and I'm just trying to cycle through as many rotations as I think I can, iterations as I can, to fit whatever goal I'm trying to have. Whether it's less than 10 duplicates, whether it's all solo, that gives you the most chance to do it with an MVP. So I don't mind it. And again, like you said, if Hurts doesn't perform on the big stage, if his shoulder is still hurt a little bit, if this game is more competitive than they've had to, and they don't perform as well as they have all season, all these are possibilities. So I agree, Jack. I think that's certainly a viable option.
I don't even know if builds would work like this, but would you just outright block two quarterbacks in the same lineup, or
I think
or
you
you
have
think
to,
that?
dude, because if you don't leave any rules and you just straight up projection smash, I think you'll get a decent amount of two quarterback lineups, especially on DraftKings. But FanDuel too, I think you would. I think you have to block it. If it beats you, it beats you because it's either going to be really duplicated or it's going to be really hard to find.
Yeah, I'm with you, and like you said, softer pricing, people are gonna find it.
Right.
Any I guess we covered the trash plays on DraftKings, pretty similar for FanDuel. Any different? I guess there's say any differences in the trash plays that stand out to you on FanDuel that were kind of different than we said on DraftKings. I'm looking through as well.
I don't think so. I mean, Sky Moore is a little cheaper. I mean, the big difference is like how much it costs you on DraftKings. Plus, you get the extra roster spot versus FanDuel, right? And that's the biggest difference here. And yeah, those guys were a little tougher to hit here. But again, if they catch one touchdown, like Justin Watson, 5,500. Let's say he catches a 30-yard touchdown. That's what 9.5 fantasy points. Can he outscore MVS and the Chiefs defense and the kickers and Gainwell? And yeah, he can. So I think you can leave. Basically, if you need them to score a touchdown if you're going to leave salary, unlike DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm with you. Honestly, I think we didn't really say this at the beginning, but I think this is a pretty good slate for
Yeah, honestly,
Super
yeah.
Bowl. I don't know what you think, but like, I mean, there's funneling guys that are sub 10%. There are, uh, amount of trash players that actually play snaps and catch the ball and stuff outside is good. The backup running back situation is good. So, I mean, this is a pretty good one. Like, if you're kind of on the fence taking a shot, I think this is among the better, high profile like games that we've seen.
I think so too. So that'll do it for this video. Hopefully, we covered a lot of angles that you can use for the Sunday big game. Again, the daily plug is up, occupyfantasy.com. Small field, large field rankings, low risk rankings, lineup construction tips for individual contests. Make sure you go check that out. Slate notes, advanced metrics. Our Occupy models up and running has projected ownership, rankings for FanDuel and DraftKings. The lineup builder, all the rules we talked about in this video, you can set in the lineup builder. That link is in the description below. Build up to 300 lineups, different slate groups. Jack, I'm using the hell out of it for all sorts of different groups and ideas and settings over the last couple of days. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, I think we need a new builder feature that like tracks who has the most rules set up, and there's like a current record. It's like a leaderboard by contest type.
We'll gamify it. I like that. Yeah.
Someone can compete with Brian for the most rules on a slate.
Yeah, well,
Good
good.
luck.
Yeah, good luck this week. That's for sure. So, all right, guys, we appreciate you listening throughout the entire season. Honestly, we're very grateful to everyone who has tuned in to any of the videos throughout the season. We appreciate that. We know you can watch many videos on YouTube, and you've chosen to watch our videos. We appreciate that. And again, if you want to support, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Comment on the video if you have any questions. Join our Discord server. We'd love to have you join our community. OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get all the premium content. And yeah, I think that's it. So Jack, I appreciate you doing these videos with me, man. We got a long off season, and then right around the corner it will be August and September again, and we'll be back doing talking about Showdown stuff.
Yes, sir. Hopefully we get a nice two-gamer to open the season on Monday, maybe. But yep, I'll be sad for the long layoff. But let's go out with a bang here.
Well, either win that Millie tomorrow or take down the Fantasy Hockey World Championship, and that off season will seem a lot sweeter. So for Jack at DFS underscore magic underscore, I'm at Brian Jester FF at Occupy Fantasy. Thank you for listening, and good luck in Super Bowl 57.